All right, hey, welcome to the No Homework Book Club for software application development professionals. Um, this is a book club that I started up at a company I was working at, and wanted to get it published on the internet here so we can share it with the world if possible. So, the whole point of this basically is that I'll read the books and I'll bring you the summary of the chapters, chapter by chapter, and then hopefully we can have a good discussion about it in the chat and comments. And yeah, just let me know your thoughts and if there's any opportunities to bring up other videos on any interesting topics that maybe come out of that discussion. We'll see where this thing goes. So, without any further ado, let's hop into the presentation. Software Delivery presents the No Homework Book Club. And the first book we're doing here is Agile Estimation and Planning by Mike Cohn. This is a great book. If you get the opportunity to pick up a copy, I definitely recommend doing it. It is a little bit pricey, so just a warning on it. If you can find it used, that would be great. But otherwise, if you do something like product manager, product owner, business analyst, if you're a requirements person, or if you work in or around requirements people or agile teams, it's worth adding to your collection. And Mike Cohn opens up the first chapter, The Purpose of Planning, with a quote from Field Marshal Helmuth Graf von Moltke. Planning is everything. Plans are nothing. That'll be kind of the theme of the first section of this book. It's the actual practice of going through planning and the actual activities and the discussions that you have and the collaboration that occurs within the members of your team that are way more important than the actual artifact that comes out at the end. So, there's two extremes when it comes to planning, and you always seek to kind of balance these two extremes. So on the one hand, a team that does no planning cannot answer the most basic questions, like when are you going to be done, and can we schedule the product release for June? It's agile software, man. We don't have deadlines, man. It'll be done when it's done, man. People say that plenty of times, and that's not really actually true. It's not really a healthy orientation for your software team. If you want to be a high performing professional team, you need to have some sort of dependability and some sort of predictability to your performance. Now, on the other hand, the team that overplans really deludes themselves into thinking that any plan is right. And their plan may be more thorough, but it doesn't mean that it's more accurate or useful. And when that goes to the utmost extreme is when you spend, getting into waterfall-y territory, just an inordinate amount of time trying to plan out every detail. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen it where months and months and months go into planning this project, and then when you get your team finally resourced and put together and spun up and you start the first sprint, half the plan goes thrown in the trash. All right, and it's very often the case. The main reason that we do agile software development, and at least one of the main reasons, is to prevent or to try to prevent building stuff that we don't need. Don't waste your time making stuff that customers and users aren't interested in and don't want. So that's the thing about over planning up front. You're not getting any feedback from the market or your user or your customer. And so how are you going to know if you're barking up the wrong tree? So if planning is so silly, then why do we even do it? Why do we even need a plan? There are legitimate reasons, like planning marketing campaigns for a product launch, um, rallying resources just around production releases, being able to train internal users. Sometimes if you're wanting to make a change, if it's significant, you want to have some hand-holding that goes along with that to guide your users through what's new. There's plenty of other reasons that might fit into these categories, but there's coordination on big projects that's necessary, and you want to make sure that you're managing the changes that your users and customers experience well, right? Otherwise, people get mad. They get mad when you change stuff and they don't know why. But beyond these perfunctory needs, there's much more fundamental reason to take on the hard work of estimating and planning. It's an attempt to find an optimal solution to the overall product development question, what should we build? What should we build? There's a lot of things you could build. Right? This is actually one of the most fundamental questions, and it's about doing Agile right. Because it's very possible for you to turn out a whole bunch of story points, but you're building something that nobody actually wants. You might be churning out tons of features, but they actually have a negative return on investment for your organization because they're just not profitable or they're not valuable. What should we build is a really important question. And not only getting the right project, the right feature, but thinking about what should we build now when we know what we have out of these 100 different things that we could make. What's the right thing to make now? That's part of trusting the Agile process, is making sure that you are building what is valuable now and not trying to predict the future, building something that you think will be valuable later and foregoing something that would actually be valuable today. Another aspect of planning, and it goes against kind of the hippy-dippy Agile world, is establishing trust with your customers. Frequent, reliable delivery of your promised features builds trust between the developers of a product and the customers of the product. I mean, it's pretty simple, but it's oftentimes overlooked. Reliable estimates enable reliable delivery. Reliable estimates benefit developers by allowing them to work at a sustainable pace. So let's talk about those. Like on a small scale, within a 2-week sprint, for example, sometimes teams get in a habit of overcommitting sprint after sprint after sprint, and they have failed over stories, and it just becomes a continuous stream of work. And while work is still getting done, here's the challenge, and where you start to get frustration is your customers, you can't ever promise them when something's going to get done because you don't have clarity on priorities of what you should do first and what you should do next. That's the most difficult part, I think, of Agile. And it's the part that takes courage, and it takes somebody with the bravery to step up and actually say no. It's very easy to say yes to everything and then come with a sad face and tell the teacher that the dog ate your homework. Happens all the time. 80% of your delivery managers, your product managers, etc., operate that way. But if you want to be a top performer in this field, you need to get serious about disciplining your sprint commitments if you're running Scrum or otherwise. Any kind of commitment that you're making. It's the old adage of under-promising and over-delivering. It's far better to commit to a smaller sprint that allows for some extra time, and then you can actually make legitimate commitments to your customers that are fairly reliable about when things are coming out, as opposed to having the failover, continuous stream of work, chaos that ensues. All right. You're never going to hit it perfect. So on what side do you want to lean lean to undercommitting and over-delivering. And the same thing goes with this, is like, there's another later chapter that'll talk about it, about trying to maximize capacity of every individual on your team, leading to gridlock. But, you want to work at a sustainable pace. There are also, in knowledge work and creative work, having peace of mind among the team actually pays dividends. It actually pays dividends not to have people stressed out and redlining it all the time. They put out higher quality work, and in the long run, they're able to complete projects more effectively in that way and make better decisions because they're not always knee-jerk reaction panicking at everything. So you want to work at a sustainable pace. Make sure that you're establishing that trust of committing to what you can do reliably and you're confident in it. Next part is conveying information. So a plan, it conveys the expectations and it describes one possibility of what may come to pass over the course of a project. It's not a guarantee of an exact set of features on an exact date at a specified cost. Right? That is the old school way of doing things, and it's also the way that is generally a big failure. Okay? Most projects that try to do this end up taking twice as long as they estimated, cutting features, and having a bunch of bugs and a bunch of hell ensues as you're scrambling to try to get this thing out the door before everyone gets fired, right? So that's not what this is about. A plan is not about locking in a set contract. It's about trying to project what the future looks like. It sets a baseline of expectations, right? But it's not to be reduced to a single date and then forgetting about what are the inputs that led to that date. It's one reason why I really encourage delivery managers and project managers in software to report to your stakeholders and your customers, report progress on features by a percentage completion, if possible. Maybe you can also provide details of what features are in development, in testing, are already released or prepared for release, etc., with a detailed breakdown. More of a percentage completion, I think, is far superior to providing an actual date, if possible. Now that being said, as you start to approach the late, 75%, you're in the end game, then you can start to narrow that down. Hey, we're thinking it's ending in this month. And then as you start to approach it and things are really coming together, locking in a specific day. And you have to really get serious about managing to that date at that point. That's when the game starts, is in the final quarter. Right? But that's, about managing those expectations, and as the risk starts to reduce when you're coming towards the end of that project, you can have more and more confidence in a particular date. So what makes a planning agile? Yeah. Agile planning, it really shifts that emphasis from the plan to the planning, just like old Helmuth Graf von Moltke was talking about in the army. So the point is that we need to be able to rapidly execute these inputs and outputs. What is the lay of the land? What are all the conditions going on in my enterprise environment? What's going on with my team? What's going on in the economy and the market for our industry? What kinds of other projects are going on in the organization? All of these things affect your ability to secure resourcing and execute work. And so being able to go through that planning process over and over again, it helps you to stay on top of things. We want to balance the effort and investment that we put into planning with the knowledge that we're gaining as we execute the project. And as you learn, you're revising your plan. See, that's what really makes Agile different from waterfall, where we make all the requirements up front, we execute all the work, we test all the work, and then we release it. The benefit of Agile is this feedback loop that we're getting along the way. It means that you're not supposed to be a quiet genius sitting in a tower drafting this beautiful document. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people think they come up with this genius idea and then they want to just run all their teams into the ground executing it. They don't ever take a second to think, do we want to change this idea? Or like, this isn't working, we need to adjust. People just stick to their plans like they shot an arrow into the sky and it just has to follow the trajectory that started with. It's not that way. It doesn't have to be that way. So as we discover things, they should affect our plans. And we need plans that are lightweight so you can change them easily. You shouldn't have this huge, heavy plan that's like turning a battleship around. I don't actually know if it's hard to turn a battleship around, quite frankly. Maybe it's easy. I don't know. But anyways, because we acknowledge that we can't totally define a project at its outset, it's important that we don't perform all of the project's planning at the outset. Agile planning is spread more or less evenly across the duration of a project. And that's really the way that it should be done. I actually disagree with that. It should be front-loaded and then kind of gradually taper down. You should have less planning at the end of the project. Well, no. I'm talking myself out of that. There's a dip in the middle. There's like planning at the beginning. In the middle, you're kind of just cruising. And then towards the end, you need to start planning again. It picks up again. So up front, this is what I would recommend. You don't want to be completely willy-nilly, just going half-cocked and not knowing what you're doing. Like, get an idea of what it is you're building. Make sure that your technical team has a concept of what is the architecture that we want to do. Make sure that your project manager or your delivery manager has identified what kinds of resources you need. What kinds of people with what skill sets do you need? What other teams are you going to need to be doing work on this? You need to get them in on the ground level. You need to establish buy-in. I call it uniting the kingdoms. Okay? This is my own thing. I just imagine myself as King Arthur riding through all the little fiefdoms and petty kingdoms, and you need to unite all the feudal lords into one giant army to complete your project. Right? Teams are very likely to kind of give you sass and maybe throw you into backlog, hell where you're never coming out if you don't bring them in on the ground floor and give them a little bit of a feeling of participation in the initial onset of it. So as a delivery manager, one of the most important things that you can do is identify what are all those resources you need, usually human resources. Now there's also like budget and actual like technology, sometimes hardware, sometimes like physical things like boardrooms, sticky notes, markers, stuff like that. Okay, those are a little bit easier to get, quite frankly. Like, make sure that you're paying attention to that. The human element is the hard part, okay? Make sure that you have got people on board, you've got the right skills that you need to complete your work, and that you've identified, if you have other teams in your organizations or third parties, you've identified somebody and you talk to them about it, that they can be the point person, kind of be the delegate of their team. Because there is this issue where if nobody owns that relationship, you're going to have trouble. You won't know who to go to. and then those people will easily like shirk responsibility. If you've got one person who's a get shit done kind of a person, you got to find that one. You got to make good friends with them and get a back channel handshake to have them help you accomplish your project or whatever it is that you're pursuing. That's the way things really get done. All right. That's what they're not going to teach you in the books. And that's it for chapter 1. All right. That's all there is to it. Next up, we're going to have chapters 2 and 3. And that one will get a little bit more dense into the material, but we'll cover, what goes wrong traditionally in planning. And then, how do you take an agile approach to effectively manage and mitigate those pitfalls going forward. So hopefully this was helpful to you. Check out the next episode if you want to see more. And make sure that you please subscribe to the channel if you're liking this stuff. I'm going to try to be putting out some of this material pretty regularly. And leave a comment. I'm curious if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to see addressed in a future video. Drop a comment below. All right. Thanks.